with the way trade negotiations are going between the Packers and Jets around Aaron Rodgers, Brian Gutekunst and company might have to make a decision on David Bakhtiari before they make one on Aaron Rodgers. Plus, our pal Matt Derry from Locked On Lions joins the show to talk about what has been a stellar offseason for, I hate to say it, the NFC North favorite right now. All of that on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. The Packers and the Jets, according to Tom Pelissero, are not far apart, but also not close on trade negotiations. That they're close-ish, but they're still... the way he phrased it was very weird, because he was like, well, the deal is close, but a trade is not close, which doesn't make sense to me. Either they're close or they're not close. Apparently they're not far off in compensation, but that neither side wants to budge. Okay, this could drag on through the draft, and that changes the timeline of a lot of different things and a lot of different reasons. That's not what we're here to talk about. What we are here to talk about right now, today, is that David Bakhtiari, his future on this team is, in the short term, at least in 2023, not in question. He will be on the Green Bay Packers in 2023. He will presumably be the starting left tackle for the Green Bay Packers. What happens beyond that, though, is fascinating. He is due $40+ million on the cap in 2024. He is not going to play in Green Bay on that cap number. If Bakhtiari is cut or traded, he will save the Packers $21.5 million, but $19 million will remain in dead money. That's a lot of dead money. More on that in a second. So, the Packers have a decision to make. And that decision is, do you have to plan for the future of the Green Bay Packers at left tackle in the NFL draft? Because if you want a high-quality tackle, especially a left tackle, history tells us the draft trends and all of the data suggests, despite the fact that the Packers are outliers on this, they find guys like Josh Sitton and TJ Lang and David Bakhtiari and Zach Tom apparently they just grow on trees in the 4th round. That is not the historical norm in the NFL draft. And in fact, they have found quality offensive linemen in the 1st round in the past. Guys like Brian Bulaga, Elton Jenkins was a top 50 pick. So they have spent premium draft capital and also found these players. Traditionally, that is where you find them. And if you think you're going to be a good team, you don't think you're going to get the 15th pick in the draft. Most years, this is a draft where you're going to get 4 quarterbacks are going to go probably in the top 5 or 6 picks. That's going to push players down. There's 2 defensive players that a lot of people are excited about. I personally am not super excited about Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. There are some cornerbacks we're talking about, some offensive tackles we're talking about, really not a lot of skill talent to talk about that high. So you could be in a position to take one of these top tackles, a Paris Johnson Jr., for example. That was who Daniel Jeremiah most recently mocked to Green Bay. When you have that opportunity, if you think you're going to need that guy in a year, you really should think long and hard about taking advantage of that opportunity. Now, the Packers have two other options here. One is Yash Nyman. They put a second-round tender on Yash Nyman. As I said when we discussed that decision, the Packers either believe he is part of your future, in which case you should sign him, and sign him now to a below market deal for a starting tackle, because he's not. He's a swing tackle. Or you let him either be traded for an extra second or walk after this season. If you think he's part of your future, then you don't have to plan for the post-Bakhtiari world. You have the plan on your roster. The other option, and this would be very, very out of character for the Green Bay Packers, you could extend David Bakhtiari. He is still only going to be 32 next offseason. Now, the fact that he didn't restructure his contract with void years to spread more money out may suggest that he wants at least the option to go somewhere else. But here's the thing. Aaron Rodgers probably only going to play 2023, max 2024. David Bakhtiari could play 4 or 5 more seasons. And we saw him last year play at an extremely high level. An extremely high level. When he was out there, all of the advanced stats, the pass block win rate stuff, and the Pro Football Focus grades support what our eyes saw. When he was out there, when he was healthy, he was superlative. He was David Bakhtiari. And maybe over the next couple of years, he becomes like Teron Armstead for New Orleans and then in Miami, where, yeah, you're probably going to get 13, 14 games out of him. But in those 12, 13, 14 games, he's going to be a really, really, really high-level player, and those guys are really, 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 really valuable. For the Green Bay Packers, you have to be able to protect Jordan Love. Ben Baldwin posted an index model that he uses based on grades of the projected starters, and had the Packers as the second best projected pass protecting team in the league by value in 2023 because of David Bakhtiari. So if he's really good, that's really good for your offense, and you would consider an option like extending him. Now, it would be unique and it would be unprecedented essentially in the Packers, really in their history, mostly just because like fourth contract's not really a thing. But for Green Bay, like it is potentially on the table, and is the kind of thing that in this situation, if you're good, and I think this is the key, if he's good, but more importantly, if the Packers are good, it is something that I think you have to take a hard look at, because you are just not going to find David Bakhtiari, even at 32 and coming off the injuries with the ACL. He's healthy now, presumably. If he wants to keep playing, why wouldn't you let him keep playing? Why wouldn't you pay him to keep playing? I think this is contingent on what happens this season. If the Packers aren't very good, or don't seem like they are very good, or don't seem like they have a path to be very good, if Jordan Love isn't very good, then you probably move on from David Bakhtiari. You save the money. You eat the dead cap next year when you're not also eating the Aaron Rodgers dead cap. You've got plenty of money to reset all of this. And maybe an aging left tackle is not what you want, and you're able to move him to a team that will give him a new contract. You'll get some draft assets for him, and you go from there. But if he's good, and more importantly, if the team is good, I think there's a real case to be made of extending him. Now, he has to want to do that. We know that that's part of this. But the Packers have options here. I don't want to write off offensive tackle as a need, and I think that they'll know better than anyone what David Bakhtiari wants to do. Hopefully that they have been communicating with him when they put together the voids. Clearly they could have done more things to give themselves more future flexibility. They decided not to do that. And maybe it's as simple as the reason you didn't do that is because they want to get an extension done. That you don't want to put those void years in there to give yourself this artificial timeline. I'm reaching a little bit on that. It could just be as simple as they're ready to be done. Now, I would have thought they would have wanted to give themselves a little bit more flexibility with the way this could end. The reality is you don't always have that choice because a player has to agree to amend the years on the contract. They have to agree to those void years. And David Bakhtiari might have just said no. So how does that question impact their draft strategy? We're going to talk about that after this, but today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Love a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So how does this impact what the Packers might want to do in the draft? So I'm just thinking out loud here. If the Packers get 43, let's say, from the Jets, now you have 2 top 50 picks. You can go tackle at 15 and feel like you're still going to be able to get your pass catchers with value. Maybe you can get a Jalen Hyatt at 43. You can get a Luke Musgrave or a Sam Laporta in that range. This is a terrific tight end class, but those guys are going to be gone fast. So you don't have to take one at 15. You don't have to do the Dalton Kincaid or Michael Mayer thing at 15. But it'd be nice to have an extra top 50 pick to bolster your pass catchers. And so I like the idea, frankly, precisely because I think you can still get good value in the second round. And the league has traditionally been bad at ordering tight ends. If you look at the draft trends over time, the great Pro Football Focus studies that I reference all the time on the show about it, the NFL has not been traditionally great at figuring out who the good tight ends are and where to draft them. You're not that much more likely to get a good tight end in the first round than you are in the second, third, fourth, etc. So don't shoot your own abilities. Don't overhype. Don't be overconfident. Don't even be confident in your abilities to make these sorts of decisions when it comes to tight ends, because traditionally the league is not very good at that. Do teams think that way? No, they don't, but maybe they should. So of those 3 positions, if you think those are 3 positions of need, it makes sense to make 15 where you get the tackle, so that at 43 and 40, that those 2 top 50 picks that you have, now you can attack your pass catchers and still get high quality players. You still have a better than 50% chance of getting a quality starter in the high second round at receiver. So why don't you take advantage of that opportunity? The second round, unless you can get wide receiver 1, and I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is that kind of guy at 15, that if he's there, you take him. If he, the OSU Pro Day is this week, if he runs the 40 and runs in the 4.5s, if he runs in the 4.4s, it's a wrap. He's going in the top 10, I think. If he runs let's say 4.45 or 4.55, excuse me, then it becomes interesting. It doesn't bother me. He's wide receiver 1. I don't think that Quentin Johnston is frankly that close to him. He's a first round player. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is like a top 10 kind of talent. I'm all in on him. But you don't have to go there. There's some guys on day 2 that I really like. And even into the 3rd round, guys like Cedric Tillman, Xavier Hutchinson, there are some players that fit what the Packers like, what the Packers want, who could be there for you. Now, if you're going to get that extra top 50 pick, though, you can flip this around. And now you can mix and match these all over. So regardless of where the pick is, the Packers are going to get another one of these top picks. Like they're not settling for anything less than 43. If you can get 13 or that's a pick swap or whatever it is, they're going to get one of these extra top 50 picks. Maybe you go Jackson Smith-Njigba at 15. Well, now you still have the extra pick in the top 50 to grab another pass catcher and a blocker. You can do both. And maybe getting 43 gets you a little bit closer to someone like, we'll see how this all plays out. Because the tight ends, it's a jumbled group. But like Darnell Washington, is he going to be a 1st round pick? Maybe he is. But if he's not, 43 is probably going to be closer than 45, 48, or wherever you end up being. Who knows what the Packers do with trades and all that stuff. So whatever the decision that you make in terms of the order that you take these players in, having that extra pick gives you a lot of flexibility around when you're actually going to take these different positions. And it all has to do with the shape of the draft. Where do you like the players? Where do you like the value? Now, for me, I think someone like Dalton Kincaid is worth the 15th overall pick. So I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to take that leap, right? And believe that I can get one of these other offensive tackles in the 2nd or 3rd round. You have these extra picks. The Packers do not need to focus on the defensive side of the ball with these premium picks if they don't want to. And so you're putting yourself in a really good position to address all of these needs. Now, let's say you think Yash Nyman is it, or you think David Bakhtiari is in a position to get an extension, and you're excited about that. Now you don't even have to worry about it. Now you just go attack whatever positions you can find, best player available, all that stuff. Now, I still think you need 2 pass catchers, and I would be very surprised if the Packers, because they're going to get one of these extra picks in the top 50, if they come out of 3 picks in the top 50 without at least 1 pass catcher, I will be floored. They're going to come out with at least 1 pass catcher, maybe 2. And I'm going to be honest, I like the idea of not going pass catcher early if you have these extra picks, because you don't have to. There's going to be good value on day 2 with those guys at positions where traditionally you don't have to use a 1st round pick on those players to get them. And if you're going to go offensive tackle or pass rusher, for example, you want to grab Lucas Van Ness, you want to grab Nolan Smith at 15. Go do it, because traditionally you want to get a premier pass rusher. You have to do that at the top of the 1st round anyway. All right, we're going to get to our pal Matt Derry here in a second. Before we do, you think you could win these negotiations with Joe Douglas? If you're Brian Gutekunst, well, put your money where your mouth is. Ultimate Football GM. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard me talk about this mobile game. And if you ever thought you could be a good GM, you got to give the game a try. Jets fans, I know you're listening. You think you're way smarter at this than me? Prove it. Ultimate Football GM is your chance to prove it. Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling everything in your franchise. The right coaches, the right coordinators, the finances, player salaries, terms, free agency, draft, player personnel, the ups and the downs. All of it in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want. Locked On Packers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code Locked On in the game store. That's Locked On. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com to look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the NFL Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Detroit Lions nearly made the postseason last year and are very much operating this offseason like they expect to be there in 2023. They have revamped their secondary with players like Emmanuel Mosley, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They replaced Jamal Williams with David Montgomery, and according to our friends at FanDuel, are the favorites to win the NFC North. Joining me now from Locked On Lions, pumping his fist, Matt Cherry. And Matt, there is certainly a line between playoff team and contender, but how do the Lions make the jump from non-playoff team to playoff team, or have they already done it?
Yeah, Pete, I'm penciling in 14 wins. I don't know about you. All right, are we really recording? Let's start over. No, here's the thing. I mean, the expectations, and I said this on my show on Tuesday, the expectations are now going to be raised. There's actually going to be a bullseye on their back, and I'm going to be very interested in seeing how they do. But with that being said, like you said, you just rattled off a few names. The roster is so much better already. Like the secondary has been revamped. They went from drafting Jeffrey Okudah to third. He's now their sixth cornerback. So like they're ready to rock, and they feel they bring their staff back for the most part. Ben Johnson's back as OC, and we still haven't even had the draft yet. So they are in prime position here in this division to make some noise.
How does what you've seen so far affect the way that you would predict the draft playing out for them? Because there is certainly a case to be made. Look, the Lions are not going to have a top 10 pick anytime in the near future unless they get lucky on something like the Matthew Stafford trade and the Rams crater the way that they did, and now they have the 6th overall pick. Considering they are appearing to try and win now, let's go make the playoffs, let's try and get better. Someone like Anthony Richardson seems really appealing in a vacuum, but that doesn't seem to me to fit with the way that they've handled this offseason. What do you think about that?
Oh, I agree. I mean, why would you draft a guy that won't play for 3 years? Maybe 2, in Anthony Richardson at number 6. I don't think that they're going to do that. I think they're going to take the best available player. Even if they think it's Richardson, I would take the quarterback out of the mix. I don't even think he'll be there. Biggest question for me is, will they pull the trigger on Jalen Carter at 6?
Yeah.
They need a nose tackle, a D tackle that can clog the middle. They've got some decent depth there with Buggs and McNeil and Onwuzurike coming back, but that would be the guy. The problem is, if you go back and look at the Sheila Hamp era as owner and her mother as well, Mrs. Ford, Martha Firestone Ford, they've never really taken guys that a month or two earlier were in jail or got in some trouble or are overweight. It's always been squeaky clean down in Allen Park for the most part. They had some guys that Matt Patricia thought were cancers, like Diggs and Slay. Those guys are great football players, and it turned out Patricia was wrong. So that's the question for the next month: is will they pull the trigger at 6? If 4 quarterbacks go ahead of the Lions at 6, and then Will Anderson, that leaves Jalen Carter at 6. He does fill a need, but a lot of mocks, Pete, had the Lions taking a corner at 6. But how can you take a corner now when you've got 6 of them in your stable at the moment?
And even so, someone like Devon Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez, those are really good football players, and you can never have too many corners. I'm going to throw this at you because I think there are real questions now. The Eagles, by some models, have lost more in terms of value than any team in the NFL this season in free agency. The 49ers quarterback position, we have no idea what that is going to look like. Dallas is unproven until further notice. If you're the Lions, where do you think they stack up in the NFC? Because I think you can make the case that they're like the 2nd or 3rd best team in the league right now.
Well, some
in the NFC.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Lions, after beating your Packers in week 18, people were like,
yes, glad you
they're
brought
the
it up.
second best team anyway. And they're the greatest 9-win team to not make the playoffs in the history of the sport. But no, there's a lot of momentum there. Like you said, the question, it has to be raised though, is now that the talent level is raised and everything else and the expectations are there, can they follow up and follow through? What will the schedule look like when it comes out? They got to play the Chiefs. They've got to play, some decent teams, AFC West and stuff like that. So it remains to be seen, but you have to like where they sit. I do believe that they are the favorites to win the division. I'm not going to sit here and say, like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did the other day, they might have more talent than the Eagles. Philly knows how to win. They won close games. They won playoff games. They made the Super Bowl. Lions still haven't gotten there yet. So I'm going to pump the brakes on ranking them in the NFC. I love what the Niners have done defensively still, no matter what the quarterback situation is. And I think Shanahan's a genius. So, but division-wise, no, there's no question that with all the Vikings decimation in free agency and cap-wise, the Packers, the Bears, who I know people are fawning over, but they're not ready. The Lions believe they are.
All right, thanks to Matt Derry for joining the show. That conversation from Locked On Sports Today. All of the big stories that you need to know in under 20 minutes. Go check out Locked On Sports Today, wherever you get podcasts. We will be back tomorrow. Plenty more to hit on as we get closer to the NFL draft. I think we just have to sort of put the Aaron Rodgers stuff on the back burner until we learn more about what's going on, because the facts on the ground so far have not changed, and we don't have any more information other than that. The owners meetings are coming up. Maybe there's some momentum there. Woody Johnson and Mark Murphy get in a room and hash this out. I don't know. But until then, I'm going to try and not talk about it. We'll see, like, narratives pop up like we had to address yesterday. And thanks to everyone, awesome feedback we got on yesterday's episode. Today, not quite the banger that yesterday was, but they can't all be like that, or it's just going to be fake. Or this is going to turn into, First Take or whatever. And First Take, that's not even shade at them. I don't have a rotating cast of characters that I can bring in and bounce ideas off of and tell them that they're morons for what they're thinking. Like, that's just not what we do here. So hopefully everyone understands that. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, like when Aaron Rodgers makes a decision, I don't know, we'll find out when that is at some point in the future. Come hang out with us live on our Locked On Packers YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.